Remember when Batman couldn't turn his head? Well, it turns out his car had even weirder problems. What if I told you that Tim Burton's 1989 Batmobile was built on a stretched Chevy Impala chassis and had to redesign Batman's cowl just so Michael Keaton could fit inside? This isn't just another movie car. This is 20 feet of pure Gothic madness on wheels. Today we're counting down 20 absolutely bizarre facts about the most iconic superhero vehicle ever created. And trust me, number 1 will make you question everything you thought you knew about this legendary machine. Hit that like button if you've ever dreamed of driving the Batmobile, and let's dive into Gotham's strangest automotive secrets. Number 20. The Batmobile was built on a stretched 1959 Chevrolet Impala chassis. Yes, really, beneath all that intimidating Gothic armor and jet black mystique lies the bones of a classic American family car. Designer Anton Furst and his team took a standard Impala, stretched it to nearly 20 feet long, and then basically went insane with the bodywork. The Impala's V8 engine was kept but heavily modified. They reinforced the frame to handle all the extra weight from the custom body panels. It's like putting a tuxedo on a golden retriever, except the golden retriever breathes fire and fights crime. The chassis had to be stretched so much that it created handling problems during filming. The car could barely make turns without a three-point maneuver. Director Tim Burton didn't care. He wanted presence over practicality. And honestly, when you see this thing rolling through Gotham streets, the last thing you're thinking about is its turning radius. The modification process took months. They had to custom fabricate mounting points for all the gadgets and armor. The original Impala weighed about 3,500 pounds. The finished Batmobile, nearly 3 tons. That poor Chevy suspension was basically crying for mercy every time they drove it. Number 19, Michael Keaton's Batman cowl had to be redesigned with shorter ears specifically because of the Batmobile. This is peak Hollywood problem solving. The original Batman costume had these tall, dramatic bat ears that looked perfect in publicity shots. Then someone tried to put Keaton in the car. The sliding canopy wouldn't clear the ears. Every time they closed the cockpit, Batman's ears would get caught. Imagine being on set, watching Batman repeatedly bonk his head trying to get into his own car. The costume department had to create an entirely new cowl just for driving scenes. They called it the driving cowl. Creative, right? The shorter ears changed Batman's whole silhouette when he was in the vehicle. If you watch the movie carefully, you can actually spot the difference between standing Batman and driving Batman. It's subtle, but it's there. This wasn't a cheap fix either. Each cowl cost thousands of dollars to produce, and they needed multiple versions for stunts and backups. All because someone didn't think to measure the cockpit clearance before designing the costume. Burton apparently found the whole situation hilarious. Here's this intimidating vigilante who strikes fear into criminals' hearts, defeated by his own ears. Number 18. The Batmobile's jet engine intake used actual parts from a Rolls-Royce jet engine. Not replicas, not props, real jet engine components. The production team somehow acquired parts from a decommissioned Rolls-Royce turbine and integrated them into the front nose cone. This wasn't just for show either. The intake actually functioned as part of the car's cooling system. Air would flow through those jet parts to help cool the actual Chevy engine underneath. It's completely unnecessary and completely brilliant. The parts alone cost more than most people's entire cars, but Burton wanted authenticity in his absurdity. When you looked at that intake, you were looking at genuine aerospace engineering. The irony is that most viewers had no idea. They assumed it was just movie magic. Nope, that's real British jet technology bolted onto an American muscle car chassis, dressed up as a vigilante's ride. The insurance company apparently had a minor heart attack when they found out. Genuine jet parts on a stunt vehicle? That's a liability nightmare, but the effect was worth it. When that intake caught the light, it looked like it could actually achieve takeoff. Number 17. The turbine blades visible in the nose cone came from a British Harrier jump jet. Specifically, a decommissioned Sea Harrier that had seen actual combat service. The production designer tracked down these parts through military surplus channels. These weren't just any turbine blades, these were from the compressor section of a Pegasus engine. The same engine that allowed Harriers to hover and take off vertically. They had to be specially mounted and balanced to spin freely when the car moved. The effect made it look like the Batmobile had a functioning jet turbine, which, to be clear, it absolutely did not. But the illusion was perfect. The blades would spin from the airflow as the car drove, creating this mesmerizing visual that screamed, "This thing means business." The Harrier connection wasn't random either. Burton loved the idea of military-grade technology being repurposed for vigilante justice. It fit perfectly with Batman's character, a man using tools of war for his personal crusade. Plus, British aerospace parts on an American car for a Hollywood movie. That's globalization before globalization was cool. The blades had to be polished and treated to prevent rust. Someone's job on set was literally Harrier blade maintenance technician. Number 16. The sliding canopy operated like a fighter jet cockpit instead of using regular doors. No handles, no hinges, just a massive piece of curved glass and metal that slid forward on hydraulic rails. This created immediate problems. First, if the hydraulics failed, you were trapped. They had to install an emergency manual release that took 2 people to operate. Second, you couldn't just hop in quickly. Every entrance and exit was a production. The canopy took about 15 seconds to fully open or close. Doesn't sound like much until you're trying to do multiple takes. The mechanism was so complex that they had a dedicated technician just for canopy operation. One person's entire job was making sure Batman could get in and out of his car. The hydraulic system was powered by the car's engine, which meant the engine had to be running to operate the canopy. Park with the engine off, hope you weren't planning on getting out. They eventually added a backup electric motor, but it was even slower. 25 seconds to freedom. Rain was the enemy. Water would get into the hydraulic lines and cause stuttering. Nothing says Dark Knight like a canopy that opens in jerky, comedic spurts. Number 15. Many of the Batmobile's on-screen gadgets were actually functional. The oil slick dispensers? Real. They actually sprayed oil onto the road. The smoke emitters? Fully operational. They could fill an entire street with smoke in seconds. The machine guns? They fired blanks, but they were real. Modified Browning M1919s. Even the grappling hook launcher worked, though not as dramatically as shown on film. It could fire a cable about 30 feet. The bomb dispensers were functional too, dropping foam spheres that looked convincing on camera. Each gadget had its own control system in the cockpit. The dashboard looked like a fighter jet had a baby with a disco mixing board. Switches everywhere. The actors had to memorize which switch did what. Hit the wrong one during filming, and suddenly you're laying down an oil slick when you meant to activate the afterburner. Testing these gadgets was apparently hilarious. Imagine Warner Brothers executives watching grown adults play with a car that shoots oil and drops fake bombs. The cleanup crew hated the oil slick feature. That stuff was nearly impossible to clean off the road. Several Gotham street scenes had to be reshot because of visible oil stains from previous takes. Number 14. The afterburner actually shot real flames out the back. Not CGI, not clever camera tricks, actual fire. A propane system was installed that could shoot flames up to 6 feet behind the car. The effect was achieved using a modified flamethrower system typically used for agricultural burning. Yes, the Batmobile was part sports car, part farm equipment. The flame system had its own separate fuel tank and ignition system. Safety regulations required a fire marshal on set whenever they used it. The Actors Guild also required special hazard pay for anyone near the car during flame sequences. The heat was intense enough to melt plastic and blister paint. They accidentally scorched a few set pieces during filming. The flame couldn't be used continuously. About 10 seconds max before things got dangerous. The propane system added another 300 pounds to the already overweight vehicle, but the visual impact was undeniable. When that afterburner kicked in, everyone on set stopped what they were doing to watch. Tim Burton supposedly giggled like a child every time they fired it up. Here's this serious Gothic director, absolutely delighted by his fire-breathing car. Number 13. The Batmobile could transform into cocoon mode with armor plating. This wasn't just a visual effect, the car had actual armor panels that could extend and retract. The mechanism used a complex system of hydraulic arms and servo motors. It took about 45 seconds for the full transformation. Way too slow for the movie, so they sped it up in editing. The armor added another 800 pounds when fully deployed. The car could barely move in this configuration. It was basically a very expensive, very Gothic paperweight. Each armor panel had to be individually calibrated and balanced. One misaligned panel and the whole system would jam. They had 3 complete armor sets built, 1 for the hero car, 2 for backups. The cost? About $50,000 per set in 1989 money. The cocoon mode was supposed to be used more in the film, but the mechanism kept breaking. They only got about 5 good takes before giving up and using miniatures for some shots. The armor was made from a combination of fiberglass and aluminum, strong enough to look convincing, light enough to actually work. The transformation sequence required 12 different technicians to reset between takes. Number 12. The grappling hook system could actually fire and retract. The hook itself was a custom-machined piece of steel weighing about 15 pounds. It was fired using compressed air at roughly 60 psi. The cable was aircraft-grade steel rated for 2,000 pounds of tension. In the movie, it helps the car make impossible turns. In reality, it could barely support its own weight. The launcher was mounted on a swivel that could aim 30 degrees in any direction. The aiming was controlled from inside the cockpit via a small joystick. Very 1980s, the retraction system was the real problem. It used an electric winch that sounded like a dying cat. They had to dub over the sound in post-production. The cable had to be carefully coiled between each use. One kink or twist and the whole system would jam. They went through 6 grappling hooks during production, not because they broke, but because they kept losing them. Imagine explaining that insurance claim. The hook could theoretically support the car's weight, but nobody was brave enough to test it. The stunt coordinator took one look at the setup and said, absolutely not. Number 11. The Batmissile mode would shed entire body panels to fit through tight spaces. This was a one-shot deal. Once you activated it, those panels were gone. The panels were held on with explosive bolts similar to what NASA uses. When triggered, small charges would blow the bolts and panels would fly off. The remaining vehicle was basically a skeletal frame with wheels. It looked like someone had peeled a Batman car like a banana. The transformation destroyed about $60,000 worth of custom bodywork, every single time. They only did it twice during filming. Once for the actual shot, once for safety testing. The stripped-down version could allegedly fit through a space just 7 feet wide. The normal Batmobile needed at least 12 feet. The mode also reconfigured the wheel alignment, bringing them closer to the center line. This was achieved through a complex pivoting axle system that took months to engineer, and worked exactly once without breaking. The entire sequence lasted about 3 seconds on screen. 3 seconds that cost roughly $120,000 to film. Burton insisted it was worth every penny. Number 10. Hidden Browning machine guns were mounted under the front fenders. These weren't props, they were real decommissioned military weapons modified to fire blanks. Each gun weighed about 30 pounds and was mounted on a reinforced steel frame. The mounting system allowed them to extend and retract on command. When hidden, you'd never know they were there. When deployed, they looked absolutely lethal. The guns were connected to a compressed air system that simulated recoil. When fired, the whole car would shake slightly. Very subtle, very effective. The blank cartridges they used were specially made for the production. Standard blanks were too loud and created too much smoke. These were Hollywood blanks. All flash, less bang. The guns had a fire rate of about 300 rounds per minute. In the film, they appear to fire much faster. That's movie magic and sound design. The ATF had to inspect and approve the weapons before filming. There was a federal agent on set whenever the guns were used. Your tax dollars at work making sure Batman's car guns were legal. The mechanism to deploy the guns was incredibly complex. 17 moving parts per gun. If one piece failed, the whole system locked up. Number 9. The Batmobile could fire bat discs from side-mounted launchers. These launchers were built into the rear wheel wells. The discs themselves were foam props painted to look metallic. In the movie, they're supposedly razor-sharp projectiles. In reality, you could play frisbee with them. The launching mechanism used compressed air, similar to a t-shirt cannon. They could fire discs about 50 feet with reasonable accuracy. Well, reasonable being a relative term. They hit their target maybe 40% of the time. Each launcher held 6 discs. Reloading took about 5 minutes and required partial disassembly of the wheel well. Not exactly combat ready. The discs had to be perfectly balanced or they'd wobble in flight. Props team member spent hours weighing and adjusting each disc. That was someone's actual job. Disc balancer. The launchers were aimed using a small screen in the cockpit showing a camera feed. 1989 technology, so the image quality was terrible. It was like aiming through a Game Boy screen. They made about 200 discs for the production. By the end of filming, they could only find 12. The rest are presumably in someone's garage, the world's most expensive coasters. Number 8. Chassis-mounted shinbreakers were designed to damage anyone trying to carjack the vehicle. These were essentially metal spikes that extended from the lower chassis. The idea was that anyone trying to slide under or get too close would get a nasty surprise. They extended about 6 inches and were sharp enough to puncture tires, or shins, hence the name. The mechanism was spring-loaded and could deploy in less than a second. Retracting them took considerably longer and required manual intervention. The shinbreakers were Burton's idea. He wanted the car to feel dangerous, even when parked. Mission accomplished. They were never actually used in the film. The studio's legal department had a collective anxiety attack when they found out about them. But they remained on the car throughout production. Several crew members learned about them the hard way. The production's first aid kit got a lot of use. The spikes were eventually dulled for safety, but they still looked menacing. The deployment switch was unmarked in the cockpit. Keaton accidentally activated them once during a dialogue scene. The sound of spring-loaded spikes shooting out isn't easy to edit around. Number 7. The cockpit interior was styled like a fighter jet with advanced 1980s technology. Advanced being a relative term here, we're talking about CD players and voice recognition that worked about half the time. The dashboard had over 70 individual switches and buttons. Each one was labeled with tiny, almost impossible to read text. The producers wanted it to look complex. They succeeded, maybe too well. The passenger monitor was a 5-inch CRT screen that weighed 12 pounds. It displayed a whopping 240 lines of resolution. You could barely make out shapes, let alone details. The voice recognition system was revolutionary for 1989. It could recognize about 20 commands, if you spoke slowly and clearly, and the engine wasn't running. The CD recorder was particularly amusing. This was when CDs were still exotic technology. The Batmobile had a recorder that could burn custom CDs, in theory. In practice, it never worked, not once. The vibration from driving made recording impossible. The self-diagnostic system was real though. It could monitor engine temperature, oil pressure, and fuel levels. It displayed this information on a tiny LCD screen that would wash out in sunlight. The entire cockpit was a nightmare to operate. Keaton had a cheat sheet taped just out of camera view. Number 6. The gas turbine consumed fuel so rapidly it could only run for 15 seconds at a time. This wasn't the actual engine, mind you. This was a separate turbine installed just for the sound and visual effect. It burned through a gallon of fuel in those 15 seconds. That's 240 gallons per hour if it could run continuously, which it couldn't because it would literally melt itself. The turbine was a modified helicopter APU, auxiliary power unit. It produced an absolutely glorious sound but served no practical purpose. It didn't power anything. It didn't propel the car. It just looked and sounded amazing. The heat it generated was intense. They had to install additional cooling vents just to prevent the surrounding bodywork from warping. Even then, they could only run it in short bursts. The fuel tank for the turbine held 3 gallons. That's 3 takes before refueling. And refueling meant waiting for everything to cool down first. About 20 minutes between runs, the turbine starting sequence was incredibly dramatic. It would whine, building up to a screaming crescendo. Everyone on set would stop to watch. Then 15 seconds later, it would wind down like a disappointed party favor. The fuel bill for the turbine alone was thousands of dollars, for maybe 10 minutes of total screen time. Number 5. The design was heavily influenced by Art Deco architecture. Burton wanted the car to look like it could park next to his Gothic Gotham buildings and fit right in. The elongated nose, the fin-like wings, the vertical lines, all classic Art Deco elements. The designer studied 1930s architecture and automotive design. Buildings like the Chrysler Building were direct inspirations. You can see it in the stepped ridges along the body. The car's silhouette was meant to echo Gotham's skyline. Those dramatic fins aren't just for show, they mirror the city's Gothic spires. Burton was obsessive about this. He'd compare photos of the car next to concept art of buildings, making sure they felt cohesive. The black paint wasn't just any black either. They tested 17 different shades before finding one that matched Burton's vision. It had to absorb light in a specific way, creating shadows that emphasized the Art Deco lines. The interior continued the theme. The seats were designed to look like miniature architectural elements. Even the steering wheel had Art Deco patterns etched into it. You'd never see these on camera, but Burton insisted on the details. This aesthetic obsession added weeks to the design process, and tens of thousands to the budget. Number 4, the Batmobile used incredibly eclectic parts from various vehicles. The fuel cap came from a London double-decker bus. Because nothing says dark night like British public transportation, the headlights were yanked from a Honda Civic, the most practical car in the world, donated its eyes to the most impractical. The taillights came from a Ferrari. At least those made some sense. Both are expensive and impractical. The side mirrors were from a Rolls-Royce. The windshield wipers from a Mercedes. The wheels were custom made but based on a Corvette design. This wasn't intentional eclecticism, it was problem solving with whatever parts fit. The London bus fuel cap was chosen because it was big enough to handle the fuel system's flow rate. Plus, it had a satisfying mechanical action when opened. The Honda headlights were perfect for the narrow front-end design. They were also cheap to replace when stunt work destroyed them, which happened a lot. Finding replacement parts was a nightmare. Imagine calling a Honda dealer to order headlights for the Batmobile. The parts manifest for the car reads like an automotive United Nations. British, Italian, German, Japanese, and American components all working together. Number 3, the car's finish changed from matte to gloss between Batman and Batman Returns. This wasn't just a simple repaint, the entire surface treatment process was different. The matte finish in the first film was achieved using a special flat black paint that cost $800 per gallon. It absorbed light, making the car look like a shadow. But it was incredibly fragile. Fingerprints would show, rain would leave spots. They had to handle it with gloves. For Batman Returns, they switched to a glossy finish. This required completely stripping the original paint, treating the surface, and applying 12 coats of high-gloss black. The process took 3 weeks per car. The glossy version was more practical but less menacing. It reflected light, making the car more visible but less mysterious. Burton initially hated it. He thought it looked too showroom. But the gloss had advantages. It was easier to maintain, it photographed better under certain lighting conditions, and it didn't show every single touch. The paint job for Batman Returns cost $40,000 for black paint on a car that would mostly be filmed at night. But the difference is noticeable if you know what to look for. The matte version looks like it absorbs souls. The glossy one looks like it means business. Number 2, multiple Batmobiles were built for production. 2 fully functional driving versions for filming. 3 additional shells for promotion and display, each one slightly different. The hero car had all the working gadgets. The stunt car was reinforced but had fewer functional features. It was basically a battering ram shaped like the Batmobile. Building each car took approximately 4 months. The hero car alone cost $300,000 in 1989 money. That's about $700,000 today for one car. That barely turns. The promotional cars were cheaper but still expensive, about $100,000 each. They had no engines but looked perfect for photos. These were sent around the world for premieres and exhibitions. Keeping track of which car was where became someone's full-time job. The Batmobile Logistics Coordinator. Imagine that on a resume. Each car had different quirks. The hero car's canopy was smooth, the stunt cars would stick halfway. One promotional car's left wheel was slightly off-center, only noticeable if you knew to look for it. By the end of production, only one fully functional car remained. The others had been beaten into submission by stunts and mechanical failures. That surviving car is now worth millions. The others are in various states of repair in private collections and museums. Number 1, the Batmobile from Batman '89 is actually displayed in the Smithsonian. Not a replica, the actual hero car from the film. It sits in the National Museum of American History, recognized as a legitimate piece of American cultural heritage. This is the same institution that houses the Star-Spangled Banner and Abraham Lincoln's top hat. And now, a heavily modified Chevy Impala dressed as a vigilante's ride. The Smithsonian acquired it in 2012. The car had to be partially disassembled to fit through the museum's doors. Reassembling it inside took a team of specialists 3 days. It's displayed in a climate-controlled environment to preserve the paint and materials. The temperature is maintained at exactly 68 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity at 45%. The car is regularly maintained by museum conservators. They treat it with the same care as centuries-old artifacts, because technically, that's what it is now, an artifact. Visitors can walk completely around it, but can't touch it. Security cameras watch it 24/7. There's literally a panic button specifically for Batmobile-related emergencies. The museum had to reinforce the floor beneath it. 3 tons of Bat vehicle required special structural support. The display includes information about its construction and cultural impact. Academic papers have been written about its design influence. The Batmobile officially has scholarly citations. School groups take field trips specifically to see it. Teachers use it to discuss American filmmaking, design, and popular culture. The car that couldn't turn properly is now a national treasure. And there you have it. That's 20 absolutely bizarre facts about the Batmobile from Tim Burton's 1989 Batman. From its Chevy Impala bones to its place in the Smithsonian, this car is even stranger than Gotham itself. Did any of these facts surprise you? Let us know in the comments below which one blew your mind the most. And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive into Batman's most iconic ride, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fascinating breakdowns of movie history's most legendary vehicles. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.